Welcome back to SledgeHammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's play ball. Today, I am joined by Ashley MacLennan, fellow baseball enthusiast and podcaster. How you doing today, Ashley?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I am doing so awesome. For those of you that don't know, if you know me, you know I'm a very big baseball fan. I'm a very big Detroit Tiger fan. It's been in my blood my whole life. It's something I very much enjoy, and it's something me and Ashley connect on. But she's part of the Bless You Boys podcast, but also she does a podcast. It's a comic podcast called The Last Panel. And coming up, which I'm very, very excited about, she's doing a bad baseball movie called Who's on Worst. And I think that's absolutely brilliant, by the way.
We just launched this week. Our first episode came out, I think, 2 days ago. We did The Scout. So
how was that? But obviously bad baseball movie.
I mean, I would say you have to listen to the episode, but no, it's not great. It is a movie that does not understand its own themes or what it's trying to be, and it suffers for it. So, yeah.
Well, I do have the links down here in the description, guys, so you can check this out as well. Also on her YouTube channel, she gives such things like baseball basics and lingo lessons. For those of you that don't know the lingo, like loogie and toot bland, things that you might see on Twitter and not have any idea what they are. So make sure you click the link down here and subscribe to that. Don't be a nincompoop and make sure you do that. So what do you got going on in the future? I know you're really full of other podcasts, but do you have any special episodes coming up that people should be watching out for?
I think Brandon and I over at Bless You Boys will probably do a bit of a season preview starting with spring training. I know we've been a bit slow in the off season, but not a heck of a lot happening. So I know that kind of going back into that spring training timeline, we really do try to get an episode out every week or so. As more stuff happens, it would be great if the Tigers felt like signing anybody. That would certainly help us a little bit, but seems to not be the plan. I also write for the Rays and the Cubs sites at SB Nation. So obviously you got that going on, and we're leading into the season. So lots of articles coming out, lots of things going on, hoping to get the YouTube channel up to new episodes every week or so. Took a bit of a hiatus there for the last 6 months, I'd say, thanks to COVID brain. But trying to work our way back up again. So wish I had your schedule, because you seem to release something very frequently.
It's one of those things where it keeps me out of trouble. If I'm working on this, it completely keeps me out of trouble. And you said you write for the Rays and the Cubs, which is interesting because the Rays have really not done much this offseason either. The Cubs have been busier than normal this offseason with some of the trades and signings they've done. Some not so great.
Yeah.
This has been a very confusing offseason for me. You got teams like the Indians that traded Frankie Lindor over to the Mets, and then they say they want to make different moves to try to compete. Like, you just traded one of the best shortstops in the game for peanuts, almost like him. And they sent over Cookie Carrasco to the Mets. And then you want to talk about signing one outfielder to make your team competitive. And it's just funny. And then you got teams like the Tigers that we know what they're doing. We know what they're about. But one thing I'm excited for is with spring training, with us not having really a minor league spring training so far, we might see some of these kids coming over into big league camp that we can get a good look at and see what they're all about. Again, you're not going to see a Torkelson or a Green ending up in the bigs to start.
No, but just getting to see them in spring training is so exciting. I'm so looking forward to Riley Green when he finally comes up. He's just such a magnetic player. I'm really kind of hoping that he comes around. If we're going to get into prospect talk here briefly, the one guy I'd really love to see kind of own up and live up to some expectation is Cody Clemens. I know not a lot of people have put much stock in Cody, but I feel like he could be a very Ian Kinsler-esque kind of character. And he's very interesting to me.
Our second base position is open right now. So if you got a guy like Cody Clemens that can really step up and take the bull by the horns, he could be up sooner than later. And he's a guy, obviously, the last name because of his father, but he's a guy that a lot of people have on prospect watch because of the ceiling that he has. And he is a fun kid to watch, and that's what I love about spring training is, I'm lucky. I live in Hudson, Michigan. I'm a half hour away from Toledo. So I get to go and I get to watch the Mud Hens, regularly. So I do get to see some of these guys once they make it to the Mud Hens. Obviously, some of the guys come here and it's not as pretty as we'd hoped. But before we get into your first horror movie, one last question I have for you on the baseball front.
Yeah.
What is your opinions on Spencer Torkelson, third baseman?
I mean, I think that we put a lot of emphasis on the way that players play the game coming up to the big leagues.
Mhm.
And you can look back and find like scouting reports for like Trevor Plouffe pitcher. Like, I
Sure.
think that there's instances where we put a bit too much weight on the position they played in college. And we got to remember that these guys are just insanely good athletes. And we also got to look at the likes of like a Miguel Cabrera, who played both first and third much better than designated third baseman like, Nicholas Castellanos. So
Yeah.
I think Torque is a pretty substantial athlete, and I think that we have to give the chance to see what he can do.
Well,
Before
I think a guy like Torkelson is always going to be a bat first prospect.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if he's third base or first base, he's going to hit.
Yeah.
And I mean, he broke Barry Bonds' record at Arizona State. And obviously, if it weren't for COVID, the home run record, I should clarify that. If it wasn't for COVID, what else could he have done at Arizona State? So I agree with you. I think that the emphasis on where he's going to play is going to plague us a little bit. But like you said, you had Miggy at first base. He was at third. Then he moved to first. Then Prince came and he was like, I'll go back to third.
Yeah.
I'd love to have Prince over here. So I love the fact you brought that up, because you're absolutely right. Because Miggy played a third base better than a Nicholas Castellanos, who's somebody that I do as a Tiger, I always enjoyed Nicholas Castellanos. Towards the end, his attitude got the better of him, but it's going to happen once you get to that rebuild stance, I guess.
I feel like we can't blame Nick for that too much, just because I think a big part of that was the Tigers. I think they started asking a lot of him, moving him from third to the outfield. And then when he was in the outfield, they're like, hey, how do you feel about first? All without giving him any kind of guarantee or extended contract. And I think at a certain point, you have to look at it. He was a real clubhouse guy. Like, he was their union rep. He was a great guy in that clubhouse. And I think at a certain point, you look for a little bit of mutual respect with the team. And I don't think he got that. And I hate to talk, are we a pro swearing podcast? Can I swear or no?
Yeah, say whatever you want. As long as we don't see no skin, I've always said we're good.
No, you're good. But you can talk shit about it, but like, I hate to talk shit about the Tigers, but they deserve it sometimes.
Well, and he made it very open. He was one of the guys, like you said, he was a very vocal guy.
Yeah.
He made it very clear. I want to be a Tiger. I want to be extended. I want a good, but they weren't in that frame at that point, and it's upsetting because they were hitting that rebuild, and now they're talking, we'll start building in 2022, which I'm one of those people. I don't think you can set a date on that. I think you watch what your prospects are doing. You can't build a winning team on prospects alone. You have to work with free agency. You have to work with trades, because how many prospects do we think are, look at Kristen Stewart. Again, he has plenty of time. He's still young, but to us, he was a can't miss prospect when it came to hitting. We thought he was going to hit 40 bombs.
And then,
look at the struggle. You can't, trouble with the curve,
And then after a certain point, you got to say, how long are you going to sit on your prospects? Because these guys aren't getting any younger. And I think we look at a situation like a Chris Bryant with the Cubs, where they like fought tooth and nail for that extra year of service time. And now that service time is, what is that doing for them? They're looking to potentially trade him if they can. And he's definitely not the player he was when he came up in 2016. So like, I think after a certain point, you'd be like, what are you holding on to those service years for? If you get a guy up and you get him working and you can sign him to a team friendly extension after 2 or 3 years in the majors, that's the way to do it. Like, I don't know. I just don't see the value in keeping them all hoarded down in Toledo when we're not even playing minor league seasons. And,
and you brought up a good point. Look at even Bryce Harper. The electricity around him. The only guy I think that's really had that longevity, where it's just year after year, obviously, is like your Mike Trout. Mookie Betts has the ability to do that. But like you said, with Chris Bryant, when he came up, that's all you heard was Chris Bryant. Aaron Judge,
Well, I mean, you talk about Betts. Wasn't he like 172, like picked in his draft, or 176? Like, he wasn't even a hyped prospect. So like, let the kids play, as they say, right? Like, let's do it, because what are the Tigers waiting for truly at this point? Like, they got
the new TV deal.
Yeah. At this point, you need something, especially with no fans being allowed last year, depending on what, like the situation with pods or limited amounts of fans in the seats now. You have to give them something appealing to bring people out. Like,
Miguel Cabrera is not going to bring in the same amount of people that he brought in before.
No.
And I'm very pro Miguel Cabrera. I'm a big Miguel Cabrera fan. He's been hurt the last couple of years. He was, last year, I don't put any emphasis on anything good or bad last year. In the COVID shortened year, I don't think you could put any stock in really anything that happened. but I'll always be pro Miguel Cabrera. The guy won us a Triple Crown. He did everything he could to try to bring a championship to this city. You'll never hear me say a bad word about the guy. He's on his decline. We knew that would happen, but he's a superstar. He is a first ballot Hall of Famer if there ever was one.
100%.
So yeah. Well, as much as I love talking baseball, and God, I would love to talk baseball with you literally anytime.
Yeah.
We are here to talk about what got you started in the horror world. I probably should have mentioned before, you are also an avid horror fan.
Yeah.
But I want to know where that started for you, Ashley. Your first horror movies were?
My first horror movies came when I was 5, so in the cheery year of 1988. And my first horror movies were Critters, the OG, and Child's Play, the original. And it is an absolute wonder that I even watch horror movies now because of how traumatic both of those experiences were for me. Like it says something, I think, about parenting in the 80s that my parents were like, yeah, that's totally fine for a 5-year-old to watch. She won't be traumatized by that at all. Yeah.
So funny. And it's funny because you go back, like, obviously, when we were about to talk about these films, I go back and I rewatch them. Critters, look, I love Critters. I really do. That movie does not hold up today. No. Like, you go back and watch it, it just does not hold up. Child's Play, I think it does hold up. I think there's a lot of the practical effects in Child's Play that look really, really good still to this day. And obviously the cult following it's gotten, Child's Play will always have a special place for me. I think it's one of the better horror franchises of all time. The first is not my favorite. It's not my second favorite. But I think it's a very good movie. And I think that it holds up a lot of the practical effects. There's a couple points in that movie where you could totally tell it's a person in a Chucky suit walking around and it doesn't look as good. But Critters, especially, the acting, you go back and watch it, you realize that they're aliens, and like it's such an over the top. It's fun. Critters is a lot of fun. Please don't think I'm talking smack about it, but it does not hold up to the quality today as what I remember being as a child.
I feel like didn't Leonardo DiCaprio get one of his first acting roles in like Critters 3 or something like that? Am I making that up?
It's so funny. On the DVD, it literally says starring Leonardo DiCaprio in his film debut.
I may or may not have written an essay about Leonardo DiCaprio for my like junior high theater class. I was a very enthusiastic Romeo and Juliet fan. And I think I definitely mentioned it because he hadn't been in a lot of movies at that point. So that stood out. This is like one of his early movie roles.
Yeah. That's so funny. So I want to, we talked about how young you were, which was very young to start with movies like this, but let's start with Child's Play. Which scene from Child's Play affected you the most?
I think it's more of a sense of themes of scenes in Child's Play that really like stuck with me. And even now to this day stick with me. I have not watched another Child's Play movie since then. I'm not even going to lie to you. Like I know there's been like Bride of Chucky and like Chucky 17 and like Chucky 2020. But like, and I mean, I've seen clips of them. So I know like, was it Jennifer Jason Leigh was like Bride of Chucky or is it
Jennifer Tilly?
Jennifer Tilly, thank you.
Yeah.
And like just perfect for that role. Like she just owned it. But like watching that stupid doll run with like the knife in hand in those movies, it's like the first time you really see a spider move up close and it's got all those like disjointed, like moving limbs. There's just something so deeply wrong about it that it's like, it looks like a little kid, but like also not quite because the movements just aren't quite human. And I think like that just really, really stuck with me while watching those movies. Cause like I'm 5, of course I have like a Cabbage Patch Kid doll in my room. Like I don't think I ever owned like a human style doll again after that.
Right.
Like,
and that happened to a lot of people. That's how much this movie affected a lot of different people. Dolls to me, you had what was it? Not Mother May I, but you had another movie that had the dolls in it too. But to me, this is where the doll horror really took off. Not where it started, but where it really took off.
Yeah.
I don't think we have any of the Annabelles or Puppet Masters, even if it wasn't for Child's Play. Correct me. I think Child's Play came out for Puppet Master. If not, my apologies, guys. Maybe we wouldn't have Child's Play without Puppet Master. So I don't have all my facts there. But what
But
about,
like,
let's
look
talk
at
about
what
Critters.
stands up, right? Like, I mean, I feel
Right.
like Child's Play to this day, like you could show anybody, especially like elder millennials like us, like a picture of Chucky, and the instant reaction would be like, ugh. Like, if nobody's gonna look at like the Chucky doll and be like, oh, that's cute, I should get that for my kid. Everybody's gonna be
Right.
like, that menacing little shit is gonna terrify me to my core until the day I die.
And it's funny because even like in the first film, the doll to me was never like you said, I never looked at a good guy doll and was like, I need to own one of those. Even as a kid, you see that doll, you're like, fuck that thing.
Well, I think part of it is that like there's an element of clownishness to Chucky and the colors of his outfit and his hair,
Mhm.
and I think that kind of it leads to that fear that a lot of people have of clowns too, right? Like, so it kind of feeds off that it fear, and it feeds
Yeah.
off of just a general unsettlingness about clowns, and then you make it real tiny, and it can stab you in the kneecap, and it's just not okay.
Right. And the thing is, it can move around and,
Fast,
be
really
stealthy.
fast.
Well, and that if it gets caught, it just has to lay there.
Right,
The
because
normal person's gonna be like, oh, it's just a doll and walk
that's
away.
that haunts me now. It's the teeny tiny fast little footsteps, like the little like and then all you
Yes.
see is like this little flash. Like, they fed off that. There's an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where there was a dummy,
Mhm.
like a ventriloquist dummy, and he was like they thought he was like the villain and the evil, but it turned out that he was just like a long time like demon hunter trapped in the body of a ventriloquist dummy. But they
Mhm.
played off of that same fear, right? Where it's just like this tiny thing that isn't quite something you can track, moving
Right.
faster than quite, oh no.
Well, I mean, Critters isn't far off from that. 'Cause you got the little
No.
tiny monsters. And which scene from Critters affected you the most?
So for Critters, it's definitely a scene, not a scene it is a specific scene, but it's one that they kind of repeat like stylistically throughout. And they made a very specific choice in Critters where they do a lot of POV from the critters.
Hmm.
So you get to kind of see what the tiny ball of evil is looking at. And the one that stuck out to me was there was a scene where a guy was like getting ready for bed, and all you see is like the critter watching his like feet go by, and it's like it's just every aspect where the guy is like he's gonna like dart out and get him, but no, the guy moves over just enough and he doesn't quite get there. And i I tell you, when I say I jumped into my bed for the next 5 years because I was that scared of something potentially coming out from under my bed, that like I think that has to be the one that stuck with me the most. I mean, the obvious choice in Critters, I think, is when it forms like a mega critter, but
Yeah.
like, and there's something god awful about that too. But it was just that POV shot from under the bed where you hear like the little noises, and it's just watching and tracking the steps, and it's like, I'm
Hmm.
gonna get dinner. I think it's right in line. And I know we didn't talk about arachnophobia because that happened way later in life, but like it reminds me of that scene where the guy's getting ready for bed and he's like about to put his foot in the slipper, and you're like,
The
no,
slipper.
dude, no, I to this day on that one cannot put shoes or slippers on without checking them first.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. That arachnophobia, that scene always got me. That one in the cereal scene. Those are the
Yes.
two from arachnophobia that got me so bad. Like,
Yeah.
again,
I feel like this.
arachnophobia, I guess you could say, is a horror comedy
Yeah.
because John Goodman's performance in that movie is almost flawless. But man, there's so much about that movie that
Yeah.
scarred me as a kid.
I think we could just call this episode Lessons Ashley has learned from watching horror movies, because truly it's just things that I'll never do. I will never put on a pair of shoes without checking. Like, even if it's just running shoes, I like give them a good whack before I go
Right.
anywhere. Like, I will not. I won't do it.
That's funny. Well, just like in Critters too, I think one of the scenes that got me always is the very first time you see someone get killed by him. You see the cop where he gets bit on the leg and then he falls over and he's laying there, and then you just see him get drug under the cop
Yeah.
car, and it's just that's it. And I've never been much of a gore fan, and I hate the term horror porn and gore porn. I've never been a big fan of that. Saw is about it for me.
Yeah.
I like it more, Psycho, Texas Chainsaw, Critters, where they leave it to your imagination to what happened to that person. And I think that's better storytelling. It's better writing. I don't have to see someone getting their arms ripped off or their head twisted around. Like, it's just that's not for me. I can't. I love horror and I will watch it, but I would prefer to watch something psychological rather than torturous. So when you think about Child's Play, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Well, Chucky, obviously. I mean,
Yeah.
it's you can't like separate the two, right? So like as far as it goes, I think they hit the nail on the head with character design. Like I think it's so hard to do good monster design in movies. Like the
Yeah.
most successful horror movies for that reason are ones that it's everything happening off screen, like
Yeah.
the ghost that haunts in the forest, or the shadows just slipping by, or the killer stalking you behind a mask. It's really hard to nail something that's genuinely scary to look at.
Hmm.
The most recent event where I saw truly spectacular monster design was this. And oh my god, I'm gonna forget the name of it. Maybe you can help me. There was a recent like Netflix movie about this group of guys that goes hiking in Sweden. The
The
Ritual.
big, yeah, the ritual. I
Yeah,
have
and
seen that. They got yes, that bit. Yes,
the
the ritual is
giant
so good.
god creature that comes out, because they really lead you in that one. And I'm getting off topic, but you got me on horror movies, so I'm just going to
No,
go
you're
on
good.
tangents. Like they really sell it to you like it's going to be the unseen horror with like fingertips around trees and like
Mhm.
shadows moving and creepy noises. And then at the end they give you this legit deer faced monster
Yeah,
nurse god creature, and it was fucking cool. Like
yeah.
that, I didn't like the movie overall. I thought it could have done very different things to be more successful, but I loved the monster design. And I think it's a very different example, but it is an example of where there is success in creating good, genuinely scary monsters. I think the only other one that comes to mind is The Descent, where you
Yeah.
have like
Oh man.
the cave creatures. And like, that's the only time I've ever screamed in a horror movie. Only time is
That's
where they do that pan over with the camera, like she's got the handheld and there's
it's
something behind her.
right behind her.
Yeah, it's the like I legit almost jumped out of my damn skin because
So good.
the descent was so good because it created that thick tension and fear just by having them trapped. And that
Hmm.
movie would have been scary without monsters. And then
Yeah.
they like throw it at you, and that's just like, what the hell is that? And it's yeah, that
Well, and
so
the descent.
there's
What something I love about the descent, and it's something I love about a lot of horror movies in general. The descent, and you can go back to Alien, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream. You always have that final girl, and the descent was full of final girls.
yeah,
And the horror has always been a female-led genre. I mean, you can make the argument a lot of the killers are men. A lot of the killers, but a lot of your final girls, a lot of your protagonists, they're women,
yeah,
and the women are always fucking badass.
yeah,
You know, Look
yeah,
at Nancy Thompson from Nightmare on Elm Street,
yeah.
Ripley from Alien, the girls in the descent. I mean, like you have these Laurie Strode in Halloween.
Well, what
The
about
women in horror
You're
are
Next?
oh,
God,
your next is
what's her
so great,
so
and
good?
she's
Or
such a badass.
oh god, that movie. Or have you seen Ready or Not?
Oh yeah,
Oh my god, she like I mean I'm like just a huge fan of Samara Weaving, like
Samara
The
Weaving. Oh,
Babysitter, Ready or Not. She's just sensational. But like Ready or Not, You're Next. I mean, I'd even say It Follows, just because of like how well
mhm.
she like was able to own and have agency over that thing. And it, it kind of turned the whole trope of sex giving you and dooming you to death on
The
its head a
tall
little bit.
man in the It Follows. That guy got me.
Yes. Ugh.
And they filmed a lot of It Follows in Detroit,
Yeah.
which go baby.
For a little bit there was like a whole kind of niche of Detroit horror. So there was like It Follows. What was the one about the blind guy with
Don't breathe.
Don't Breathe? That one was pretty
Hmm.
good too.
Yep.
That twist at the end where it was just like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, so this isn't just your friendly neighborhood blind guy.
No, and
Yeah.
it's
That,
gross. It's so
yeah.
gross.
So yeah, there was like, I mean, I think it kind of lent on the whole concept of like um kind of destruction porn that the
Yeah.
Detroit was kind of in for a while, where people were kind of using it as almost an industry of going and taking photos, all these crumbling buildings and like the reduction of infrastructure. And I think finally it's moving past that, which is really
Yeah.
nice to see it re-energizing itself. But it definitely, there was that section of time where anything you saw about Detroit was just crumbling row houses, right? So it was
Bankruptcy.
yeah.
You got so
So
tired of hearing that shit.
yeah.
Well,
So
and we were talking about Child's Play
yeah,
and
sorry.
Chucky. No, you're fine. But one thing I wanted to bring up is the first time you really realized that Chucky's alive, when the mom grabs the box and the batteries fall out, and she's like, talk to me. And then she lights the fireplace, and she's like, talk to me, damn it, or I'm gonna throw you in the fire. And he's just like, you stupid bitch, you fucking whore. And he starts it, like, that part to me, like, because before that, when you first watch this movie, they're almost making it seem like it could be Andy that's doing these things.
Yeah.
You don't have that definitive, this is Chucky doing it. And at this point, you actually see the doll move and come to life. And he's, it's such a great scene. I love that scene. That's one of my favorites in the whole film, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's awesome because it definitely plays into that notion, like, especially I think of kids in the 80s, right? Your parents never believed you when you said anything. Like, somebody could have like broken into your house and knocked everything on the floor, and your parents would come in and be like, what the hell is this? Like, nobody believed kids in the 70s and 80s. Like, we were not entities. And so it really played on that well, because I think any parent watching that would also have assumed that Andy was the one to blame.
Yep.
And like, nobody's going to believe the doll did it, right? So I think it has to be extra scary, because then you're believing your kid is capable of all these monstrous things.
Right.
And then, so she's already got to be going through that in her head. Like, what is my kid, a monster? What is this? He's telling all these stories. People around me are dying. And then you find out, no, he's not full of shit. This is an actual legitimate possessed demon doll. And holy F, that's insane. Like, so I think it really does kind of play off the assumptions that people would make. And it gives you that really, like, it gives you a little redemption for Andy, poor guy, who will need 1 million years of therapy. But it's also like, it's expected, but also kind of unexpected, because you would think the doll would just be like, no, I'm Toy Storying it the whole way.
Right.
And then to just lash out, it was pretty crazy.
Oh, I loved it. So I want to bounce back to Critters. Now we're back on our other side of the tracks. When you think about Critters, we talked about which scene affected you the most. What would you say your favorite scene from Critters would be?
Oh, the mega critter ball.
Is it?
Yeah, come on. Like, in retrospect, the absurdity of that being something that those creatures could do. Because I think, and I don't know, I've never looked into it, so I would have to like read something about the design process if there was any actual mentality put into it. But like, the critters themselves are very much like piranhas. Like, that's really what you get. There's like a little swarming school of these vicious tiny things that will like rend flesh from bone, and they're very much piranhas. And I think that, as humans, we can generally fear the idea of a school of piranha. But could you imagine a mega piranha?
Right. Them all forming together.
And then like, if it could roll over and just devour you, it's absurd. It's like, I haven't watched it since I was a kid, but I know that it can't possibly, and you've just watched it for this. But like,
well, there's a part where it rolls over the guy, and then it just shows the skeleton laying there.
So like, in retrospect, I can't believe I was ever scared of it, because like, now my favorite horror movie is like Midsummer. So like, it's ridiculous to think that, like, but if you're 5, right, the idea of something that could roll over you and consume all of your living flesh was a little upsetting.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, because it's one of those things where one thing I very much appreciate about Critters is it's so outlandish, but it does it in such a way where they know they're being crazy. Like, the movie ends with the kid getting what looks like a garage door opener off the ground, and he pushes the button, and you watch his home come back together, which is so obviously a demolition that's just done in reverse.
Yeah.
And like, the mailbox comes back, and they hear him meowing, and they open the mailbox, and the cat that had died is now in the mailbox. And like, it's so over the top, but it makes it so great at the same time, because they know they're over the top.
Now I'm gonna
but it
have
has that
to
happiest ending. The impossible happy ending that it has there is so great. So I got a couple more questions for you. I want to bounce back to Child's Play. And I hate saying favorite, because that's so fucking dark, but what kill stuck with you the most from Child's Play?
The first one. So I think like the mom's friend, I think Maggie, is it Maggie?
The babysitter?
Yeah. And it's like, I think it's just like, I'm sure there are better and cooler kills, but like, it's that first one. Because you're
the
just
best one easily.
You're like, what like, it makes the whole thing possible. And it's just anything afterwards is just like, yeah, okay, well, the doll's continuing to kill people, but it's just, absolutely the one that like is the best moment.
Well, and I love that you don't even then you don't know it's the doll. Like you see the arm come with the hammer,
Yeah.
and it hits her, and then she just goes backwards and has the fall out the window onto the truck. But Andy was wearing that same outfit, so there's still that debate of was this Andy, was this the Chucky doll? So you kind of just said it, but I do gotta ask because I always ask, so I gotta pop this one on you. We're gonna go Scream. What's your favorite scary movie, Ashley?
Oh
What is
God!
you said it was Midsummer.
Right now,
is that
so
of all time? What is your favorite horror movie?
Oh, it might actually be Scream, just because what a tremendous reinvention of the genre.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Wes Craven's is genius.
It's clever. Like I mean, I've been rewatching them kind of one at a time every Halloween, but like the way that worked was so unexpected. Like everything from picking a A-list name actor who is kind of coming back, like Drew Barrymore, to open your movie. And of course, she's biggest on the poster. And you're like, yeah, Drew Barrymore's our final girl. And to kill her in the first 15 minutes is insanity. Like you take the whole genre and you understand all the rules of it. And then you really play into them, but also mess with them. And
that turned it on its head. You never had the big name killed in the first 10 minutes before this. And the way that they're meta. One of my favorite scenes in Scream, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. Jamie Kennedy is on the couch and he's holding a pillow, and he's like, he's watching Halloween, and he's talking to Jamie Lee Curtis.
Look behind you, Jamie.
Yes.
And
Jamie, it's like he's talking to himself. I think it's brilliant. And what's even cooler is you watch this movie and he's watching Halloween.
Yeah.
Then you watch Halloween H2O and they're watching Scream 2.
So I never made that connection.
Yeah, if in Halloween H2O they were watching Scream, they would have seen Jamie Kennedy watching Jamie Lee Curtis. I just think that's so funny to me how they went the meta with those movies and they connected those two together. I think that's so amazing. And Jamie Kennedy in Scream, and a good friend of mine, Kylie, just talked about this. Scream could maybe be, especially in the horror genre, the most perfectly casted movie of all time.
Yeah.
Every person in this movie played their role so well.
Like young Rose McGowan is like the ditzy best friend, and like absolutely, like she was just so like scathing and biting. It was really perfect.
And Joaquin Phoenix almost got the role of Billy Loomis.
No.
The reason they went with Skeet Ulrich, is because of his similar look to Johnny Depp. And with Johnny Depp being in Nightmare on Elm Street, that's why Skeet Ulrich got the role over Joaquin Phoenix. And I think that's it's so crazy. Learning these behind the scenes things are so brilliant to me and so genius. And it's just Scream. If you look at the movies, I dare everybody out there, look at the horror movies that came out the 2 years before Scream and the horror movies that came out the 2 years after Scream. And whether you love Scream or you hate Scream, Scream is the reason I got the Shriek tattoo on my arm. That's the whole reason I got that when I was 14 years old. That's how much of an impact Scream had on me. And whether you love or you hate Scream, you can't deny the impact that Scream had on the horror genre. It still has to this day.
It's what brought me back into horror. It's like because I had those early, really terrible experiences with it. And before we end, I got to tell you a great story about Child's Play and why it continued to traumatize me even after watching it. But Scream, I watched when I was in high school, and it was, all the rage. I must have seen it like 7 times in 1 year. It was the perfect like sleepover movie. It was the perfect everything movie. And it really like reawoke my interest in that genre because it was not the same same thing over and over again that we were seeing, like, Jason Goes to Hell and like 29 remakes of old things that nobody cared about. And I think as a result, I got way more into the genre. So, I mean, it's probably my favorite for that reason, but then you have to there's other niches, right? So I love Midsummer, but I don't even consider Midsummer a horror movie properly. Like, it's just such a tense character drama. And I also call it a feel-good breakup movie.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's that. But you look at The Descent is easily one of my favorites of all time. Just a tremendously executed horror movie with almost an entirely female cast.
Yeah.
And I'd say probably, oh gosh, I had another one on the top of my head that was one that I just love. And now it's just, I mean, I've seen a million of them. I honestly love the new stuff. Like, I watched so many this year, and The Babysitter was such a tremendous, like, it feels almost spiritually connected to Scream in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, because it's unexpected. It's weirdly like over the top, but it's so charming, but also really leans into the old like 80s satanic panic vibes. And it's so clever and well done. I can feel myself already wanting to rewatch it every Halloween.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels like that kind of
It,
movie.
it doesn't take itself too serious. It
Yeah.
has fun. It has scares. But see, I'm with you. I'm one of these people that I've always believed horror is what you make it. And I will fight till the end, till the last breath comes out of my body, that Ghostbusters is absolutely a horror comedy.
100%.
Like, man, the library scene, when Dana gets taken by the zoo, you're like, oh my gosh, like when I was a kid, so many scenes in that movie scared the shit out of me, and I will fight that till the day I die.
I think
Ghostbusters is absolutely a horror comedy.
I agree with you 100%, because I think the success of that movie was that it respected horror, and it absolutely leaned into some of those scares and that tension and like the unsettlingness of horror movies. I think if it had all just been like fun, cartoony nonsense, it wouldn't have been nearly as effective, but you could tell that they really respected the genre they were working in. And I think
No,
that's what makes Ghostbusters so good. I think they didn't do enough of it in the modern, like the all-female sequel, which I thought was good, but it was very much a comedy. And
that's what I was going to say. I didn't dislike that movie because of the cast. The cast was brilliant, but it didn't have the horror aspects. Honestly, that's my biggest problem with Ghostbusters 2. Ghostbusters 2 still has plenty of horror to it.
Yeah.
When you got the kid walking outside the window and the guy on the bike comes and his arm stretches out and grabs the kid and takes him, that's scary shit.
Yeah.
But the newer one didn't have any of that.
They
leaned into the comedy too much.
They did, but they, at the beginning, you could see that they tried, because when they were doing the tour of the haunted house and that scene with the open door and like good old what's his face from Silicon Valley and like that entire moment, I was like, okay, cool, they're really going to do this like properly. And then it was definitely way more of the comedy, and it was great in that, you know, Kate McKinnon was like chef's kiss, scene stealing that whole movie, and Chris Hemsworth, who knew he was that funny, like throughout that with the headshots. God, it was priceless. But it definitely, it was not a traditional Ghostbusters movie. And I think that's why people didn't like it. I think those who couldn't explain it to themselves that way blamed it on being an all-female cast.
Yeah.
But I think the problem wasn't the cast. I think the problem was just that it didn't live up to that same vibe and feeling that the original did.
I'm 100% on board with you with that. Yeah. I own it. I think it's a great movie, but it's not a great horror movie. I feel for that like I do for Army of Darkness. I love Evil Dead. I fucking adore the Evil Dead franchise. But to me, Army of Darkness is not a horror comedy. It's a comedy action adventure. There are really no aspects of horror in Army of Darkness to me. But again, Army of Darkness is one of my favorite movies. I've quoted it my whole life. This is my boomstick. You know, I've quoted that movie my whole life. And
Shauna the Dead. You know, I wouldn't really qualify Shauna the Dead as a horror movie, even though it leans into all those really incredible zombie tropes, because it's just too cheerfully upbeat, even though people are getting eaten left, right, and center. Like, it's
I gotta disagree with you on that one. Really? I totally think it's a horror movie. I do. Like,
I don't know.
For me, though, I think Shaun of the Dead, besides Back to the Future, I think Shaun of the Dead is the perfect movie because it has the love story. It has
friendship,
horror element,
funny, action.
Yes, and I cry every time I watch it when the mom's dying and Sean's like, Mom, you know, like that part. I don't care how many times I watch this movie.
Yeah.
I will cry every time I watch that scene. It's the acting in this movie is so amazing on everybody's part. And I'm actually doing a top 10 horror comedies, and spoiler alert, Shaun of the Dead is on there, and it's pretty high on the list, actually. It's number one. And here's a little hint for my number one. An actor that we have talked about is in my number one. So I'm not going to say it here. I'll tell you, Ashley, when we're done. But
Okay.
My number one of the actors we've talked about is in it. So we always end these, my friend, with the same question. We're going to go back to Critters. We're going to go back to Child's Play. We are going to rank them on a skull count. 0 being the worst, 5 being the best. Now, here's the catch. We are not ranking them on production. We are not being movie critics here. We are ranking these on how they affected you and what they mean to you, because I believe there's no such thing as a perfect movie. So nothing could ever get a 5 skull from me for being on a production critique side of it. But when it comes to how things have affected me and what they mean to me, there are plenty of perfect movies. So let's start with Critters. We're going 0 to 5 skulls. What would you rank Critters from memory? I know you said you haven't watched it in a while, but from memory, what is your ranking of Critters?
Purely on its impact and its ability to ingrain itself into me, I got to give it a 3, I think.
Okay. That's fair.
Because I think it did leave a very real mark behind. And I think Child's Play, I almost have to give a 4, and I got to give a 4 to it because of a story.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
That's why I saved it for this. The story with your dad. I got to hear it.
So my dad passed away when I was 13. So I don't have a lot of lots and lots of memories of my dad, but we watched Child's Play out at our family cabin. So there was quite a few of us all together watching this movie, which was very poorly conceived that they let me do it. But my dad thought he was a very funny man. He was like a very dark humor, sarcastic, dry kind of guy. Very much treats you like his best bud. So the day after watching this movie, we're all out on the dock, and it's me and my cousins and some family friends, and I'm out in the water and I'm swimming, and I'm 5. And my dad, standing on the dock, yells, "Ashley, look out! Chucky is on the rock behind you." And he thought this was the funniest thing he could have ever done to me, until the moment 5-year-old Ashley, who could barely swim, starts having a panic attack in the water, trying to get away from the rock, and almost drowns. So
a man of my own heart, though. I do that same shit to my kids. So
top-notch move, Dad. Yeah. So I got to give it a 4 because it's it's one of those memories you look back and at the time was terrible, but now I'm like, Dad. So yeah,
way to go, Dad.
Live in that moment. Cool. Yeah.
And it's memories like that you'll have forever. And without this movie, that's not, you wouldn't have that memory that you have now. And I think that horror movies have that impact on us, not just because of what the movie did for us, but things that happened in our lives after we watch this movie that may not have happened had we not seen these movies in the first place. So they can be the scariest, darkest movies in the world, but they can still be so light and have the biggest impact on us in other aspects of our life. So you guys, make sure, like I said, you're clicking the links down here, checking out the podcast that Ashley's doing. Make sure, don't be a nincompoop. Check out her YouTube channel and find out what Tootland. Yeah, subscribe to that. Find out what Tootland means, because I would like to know in the comments. Comment who went there and knows what Tootland means now. Don't look at other comments. Go watch and let me know what Tootland means. So everybody, thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm Ken Sledge. Keep talking horror. Stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.